The Pittsburgh Steelers are battling 5 different injuries heading into their game against the Los Angeles Chargers, according to head coach Mike Tomlin. For Pittsburgh, the good news is that none of the players have been ruled out. Safety Chuck Clark, who missed last week with an illness, should return, which will be a positive for the Steelers' ailing safety room. Clark was a starter before the Kyle Duggar trade. Meanwhile, Jabril Peppers, who has dealt with a quad injury, will work his way back. Tomlin seemed optimistic that Peppers, who suffered the injury in practice on Thursday, would be able to return against the Chargers. The 2 players up in the air the most are wide receiver Scotty Miller, who broke a finger on his left hand, and linebacker Cole Holcomb, who also is battling an illness. Holcomb missed the last 2 practices of last week, and both players seem likely to miss the start of this week. Guard Isaac Seumalo will also continue to battle his pectoral injury that forced him to miss the last stretch of the team's game against the Colts. He was only limited in practice a week ago before playing against the Colts, and there might be a similar agenda this week. On the heels of shutting down the NFL's #1 ranked offense and scoring an upset victory, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense earned a league individual honor. Outside linebacker Alex Highsmith on Wednesday was named AFC Defensive Player of the Week for Week 9. Highsmith had 2 of the Steelers' 6 sacks and one of their 2 strip sacks of Daniel Jones during the 27-20 triumph over the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday at Acrisure Stadium. Highsmith had 4 tackles overall, 3 solo and 3 for loss, in addition to a tipped pass. He also was part of a run defense that limited NFL rushing leader Jonathan Taylor to a season-low 45 yards on 14 carries. Alex Highsmith was a problem in week. Highsmith wasn't the Steelers' only viable candidate for the award. Inside linebacker Peyton Wilson had a team-high 13 tackles, 9 solo, an interception, and a tipped pass that resulted in another interception of Jones. Highsmith is the Steelers' first Defensive Player of the Week in almost exactly a calendar year, TJ Watt earned it for Week 8 last season. The Steelers are 5-3 on the season and in first place of their division despite having a down year by their own lofty standards. Mainly that's due to the rest of the AFC North going through hell and back with their rosters, but first place is first place at the end of the day. Mainly, the Steelers' defense has been pretty bad this year outside of their recent win over the Colts. On the year, they're the worst pass defense, even after adding Jalen Ramsey this offseason, and allow the 3rd most yards per game at 383.8. This week, if the Chargers want to find a way to win in prime time inside their own stadium, they'll need to play a clean game all while trying to mitigate their massive loss as of late. Joe Alt's not coming back. They have who they have on the roster going forward, not that the trade deadline has passed. Can Jesse Minter find a way to bother the stoic Aaron Rodgers? Can the offense keep Herbert clean against the likes of TJ Watt and the rest of the Steelers front? Boy, I sure hope so. With that said, here's a quick screenshot of how these 2 teams fare on paper after the first 8 weeks of the season. In the weeks leading up to Tuesday's trade deadline, the Pittsburgh Steelers were reportedly heavily in the mix to trade for a wide receiver, giving quarterback Aaron Rodgers an upgrade behind DK Metcalf at the position. Names like Jacoby Myers, Jalen Waddle, Rashid Shaheed, and even Chris Olave were thrown about. Yet, when the clock struck 4 p.m. on Tuesday, the Steelers under GM Omar Khan didn't make a move for a receiver. The asking price from teams was reportedly too high, even though Khan was apparently working hard behind the scenes to make something happen. For Rodgers, though, who spoke to reporters on Wednesday, all the talk about the team needing to add a wide receiver was outside noise, something that really wasn't resonating inside the facility, especially with Rodgers' belief in Calvin Austin III and the improvements he's seen from second-year pro Roman Wilson. It also helps that the Steelers brought in a close friend of Rodgers in Marquez Valdes-Scantling, reuniting the two after a few years apart. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of outside talk. You gotta look at the way we're playing and the personnel groupings that we like. We're a multiple personnel team, a lot of guys out there, Rodgers said when asked about the trade rumors, according to video via the Steelers' YouTube page. We had an offensive lineman play a lot of snaps. Obviously, Darnell Washington plays a lot of snaps and Jonnu Smith and Pat Frymouth and Connor Hayward gets in there on some plays, rotating 3 different backs, a lot of different receivers. So we're not a big 3-receiver team in general. And when Calvin's come back and played really well for us and Roman's been more consistent. So there was probably more noise outside of the facility than maybe inside the facility. What Rodgers said about multiple personnel and the style of play the Steelers like to roll with is the exact argument that has been made about the Steelers not needing to trade for a receiver. And yet, there was still plenty of pushback to it. The Steelers play a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, so there's not always a significant need for 2 and 3 or more receivers on the field at once. With Austin's return from injury and continued chemistry and trust from Rodgers and the steady improvement from Wilson, the Steelers were not in a position where they needed to overpay for a receiver. The argument of, what if DK Metcalf gets hurt, is a silly one too. You could do that for legitimately every position on the team. The offense might seem limited, but they're playing the style of football that they envisioned coming into the season. Rodgers called the tight end room the best he's ever been around. He loves the offensive line. He's a big believer in Metcalf as a leader, and that's resonated with the receiver room. It might not be the best-looking group on paper, but with the way they have distributed the snap counts, what the Steelers have at wide receiver works for them. The quarterback believes in the group, too. That's all that matters. The reason Jalen Waddle stayed put at the trade deadline comes down to price. Multiple teams checked in on the Miami wideout, but the Dolphins held firm at a first-round pick, and in some cases, a first-plus. Denver kicked the tires. Pittsburgh and New York also made sense on paper, yet no club met Miami's valuation with a franchise in flux after Chris Grier's exit. ESPN further detailed how the market played out as an NFL rumor. The Broncos were among the teams that explored a deal for the 26-year-old receiver, while the Steelers, Giants, and others showed interest, but balked once the ask hovered between a straight first-rounder and a 1+. The uncertainty around Miami's intentions just 4 days after Grier's firing only added to the murk, per reporting from Jeremy Fowler and Dan Graziano of ESPN. From the Dolphins side, keeping Waddle is defensible. He's under contract long-term, remains a premium separator who wins quickly, and, with Tyreek Hill sidelined, is central to whatever offensive stability Miami can salvage. Trading him now would have returned a pick, sure, but also would have further stripped support from a locker room that needs pillars as ownership evaluates the next front office structure. For the suitors, price discipline won. Denver's 6-game surge eased the urgency to overpay. Pittsburgh preferred to preserve capital while searching for a possession target at a sane cost, and the Giants, reshaping their offense around a rookie QB, were unwilling to ship out a first-rounder that could unlock broader roster needs this spring. This stalemate also reflects the broader receiver market. With several WR-needy contenders circling the same small pool, sellers aimed high, and buyers countered with value or we pass. Waddle's extension means Miami can revisit talks in the offseason if a bidding war materializes, but the franchise can just as easily double down and retool around him when cap flexibility returns. Broncos head coach Sean Payton underscored that calculus from the buyer's seat after Denver's quiet deadline. He said the team explored options but wouldn't chase inflated prices, opting to protect future assets and ride current chemistry during a 7-2 start. In other words, conviction over compulsion. Miami set a premium, the league didn't meet it, and Waddle stays a Dolphin, as an NFL rumor until now. Expect calls to continue in March, when picks are fresh, cap tables reset, and leverage looks different.